Hello, ladies and gentlemen. It's really lovely to see you this evening. My name is Kate Spencer-Ellis, and I am the head of Sixth Form here at Forest. It's my very sincere pleasure to invite you to watch today's webinar, which is all about assessment and reporting at Forest. And the person delivering this is Mr. Matthew Key, who is the Deputy Head Academic here at Forest. During the presentation, we're not expecting any technical difficulties, but please do bear with us if we have any. At the end of the presentation, I will put up a QR code because your feedback is always very welcome, and we look forward to hearing what you have to say. So without any further ado, I'm going to add Mr. Key to the stage and let him talk about assessment and reporting at Forest.
Thank you for that, Ms. Spencer-Ellis, and welcome parents this evening. If you hear lovely organ sounds in the background, that is because my office is just across the chapel and not for any other reason. Tonight's webinar is all about assessment and reporting at Forest and guiding parents and carers through the process, the reporting structure, and what to expect over the course of the academic year. My contact information can be found on this slide, and do feel free to reach out to me, a tutor, head of house or head of section at any point if you have further questions across the academic year about assessment and reporting or academic development more generally. So the agenda for the evening is as follows. I want to spend a little bit of time introducing our parent and carer community to our academic leadership team, who are really the kind of conduit by which all assessment and reporting, but also academic strategy at Forest is devised and led, and obviously the kind of main conduit through which pupil progress is seen. I'm also going to talk about the components of assessment and reporting at Forest to try to demystify those and to give parents as much clarity as possible as to what you are going to be receiving over the course of the year, to indicate how much progress your son or daughter is making. So I'll be talking about common departmental assessments, which are the main mechanism by which we assess pupils at Forest. I'll be talking briefly about progress descriptors, the Forest Learner Rating, pupil academic monitoring, which is a pupil-led process, which we're really proud of here at Forest, to give pupils agency and autonomy over that process. And finally, I'm going to end with some frequently asked questions to try and preempt some questions, hopefully, and also to clarify some of the dates around reports and parent and carer evenings. So hopefully you will have all of that. In addition to this presentation, there was a guide to assessment and reporting, which I circulated at the beginning of the academic year, which should answer any remaining questions that you would have. But of course, if those questions do persist, then please do feel free to ask them this evening. I believe Ms. Spencer-Ellis is able to take some of those questions and indeed via the feedback form at the end of this session. And of course, please do get in touch, particularly with tutors as the main port of call, the first port of call for pupils and queries at Forest. So I just want to start by quickly introducing the academic leadership team. So really, this is the main team that is involved in tracking and monitoring pupil progress and working really alongside teachers, heads of departments, and other people that are involved in the life and progress of young people at Forest. So that team is made up of myself. I chair the team. Miss Wright, who is both our head of learning support, but also our director of academic progress. And then the heads of sections, so Mr. Sloan in the lower school, Ms. Letchmere-Smith in the middle school, Ms. Spencer-Ellis in the sixth form, and their academic deputies, Dr. Peters, Miss Mackey, and Mr. Sage. So as a team, we work really closely together to track, to monitor progress, to plan interventions, and to ensure that nobody's slipping through the net. So reports at Forest in 2024-25, this academic year, effectively take three different forms. We have a termly report, we have a full report, and we have an end of year exam report. So just to quickly break down the difference between those reports. The termly report is actually a new addition this year, and it was really to address some parental concerns last year that there was a bit of a gap in feedback on reporting. Last year, obviously, there was a full report and an end of year exam report and parents' evening, but parents asked the question about what information they were getting in between times. So we've introduced the termly report this year to try to provide you with a little bit more information at a glance as to how your son and daughter is progressing. So that termly report will basically have two pieces of information in it. It will include how pupils are performing in their common departmental assessments, more on that to follow, and also it will provide a progress descriptor for each subject. The progress descriptor effectively is a holistic assessment of their progress, and again, more on that to follow. So every single year group will receive that termly report with some exceptions, and those exceptions are year 7, 10, 11, and 12, who will actually receive an additional report at the end of this half term, the start of next half term, looking back at this half term, which we're calling a health check. And the reason why we've introduced that as a very early report is to see how pupils are getting on at very transitional stages in their education as they're making the leap from prep school or primary school to senior school, and indeed as they progress onto their GCSE and A-level courses. So that is an additional piece of feedback that parents and the academic leadership team as well will be receiving from every single subject this half term, and we aim to get that published to parents first week back after the half term. And then obviously those termly reports will then follow. The full report is a report which is issued once per year, and that's a much more fleshed out report. It includes a lot of information and data. So this will include attendance and lateness information, punctuality, sanctions and commendations. And then for every single subject, there will be a progress descriptor, a Forest Learner Rating, and then accompanying specific targets for development, which are the more open-ended prose comments written by the teacher that you may well be used to in previous reports. And really this year, we're asking teachers to think about what's going really well and what it is that pupils need to improve upon. and to provide some specific guidance in the report as to how they can make that step. What's a resource that they need to access, or how can they be consolidating their learning to ensure that they progress and make that step, rather than just saying what it is they need to do. They will say how they can achieve that as well. And then in addition to that data and information, pupils will also receive a summary report from their tutor, which will really talk about how their personal development is progressing, how they're contributing to different aspects of school life, including the co-curricular. And then finally, pupils will also participate in academic monitoring, a bit like they did last year, and they will actually respond to their report, and their responses in their own language, in their own words, will be captured on the report and issued home as well, to try and increase that pupil ownership. So that full report is an extremely comprehensive document. As such, it's issued once per year. But I hope that will provide parents with lots of steer, lots of information, which can then be picked up and dissected at parents' evenings, but also in conversations with teachers and tutors as the year progresses. And finally, we're going to be issuing an end-of-year exam report, which is a bit like a termly report, but with some more additional information. And that will include how they've got on in their end-of-year exam. Obviously, all year groups sit an end-of-year exam at Forest, unless they are sitting real public examinations, year 11 and year 13. And they will receive a cohort average. So you will be able to baseline very quickly how their score maps onto the rest of the cohort to see to what level they're progressing relative to their peers. But then also for year groups who sit public examinations or are gearing up towards public examinations, we will also be providing an indicative outcome grade. So, for example, pupils in year 10 and 12 will receive a grade from 9 to 1 or A star to U, which will indicate how their performance in that end of year examination maps on to a public examination. You'll note that we're not doing that in year 7, 8 and 9 because frankly it's impossible. There is no rubric that exists that can map Key Stage 3 progression onto Key Stage 4 public examination outcomes or Key Stage 5 public examination outcomes. And we actually think that engenders false equivalencies. So we won't be providing A star to U or 9 to 1 grades for pupils in year 7, 8 and 9, but we will from those other year groups upwards to provide you with as much information as possible early on. So very quickly, just to sketch out what these different components that we're going to be reporting back to you are, the first thing that I should talk about is the common departmental assessment. And as I've already mentioned, this is the main mechanism by which pupils are assessed at Forest. But to say it's the only mechanism would be a gross oversimplification of how assessment and reporting works in schools in the 21st century. In reality, pupils are assessed in every single lesson and usually multiple times during the lesson through questioning, through assessment of work, through collaborative tasks, through plenaries and discussions and debates. So that assessment is what we call formative assessment, and that is very much ongoing. It could be through their homework tasks, it could be through their engagement in lesson. But the common departmental assessment is a slightly higher stakes assessment, which is sat once per term at Forest, and it's common across the entire department. So in other words, it's a standardized assessment within each subject. The whole cohort will sit the same test, but it might not happen on the same day. So we do try to prevent leakage. We might alter the way in which that's delivered, and we do try to keep it to the same day as far as possible to prevent that leakage. But that is how the common departmental assessments work. Pupils are provided with a common departmental assessment grade for each assessment that they sit. And we are this year going to be reporting that grade home as part of the termly report that we're issuing. And this common departmental assessment grade will effectively measure how well they have done in that particular assessment. So I want to really caution against what a common departmental assessment is and isn't. A common departmental assessment is not an holistic judgment of how well they are doing in that subject. It's an assessment of how well they have done in that particular assessment. And I think the most important part of the common assessment process is the feedback that pupils will receive following that assessment. It's not the grade. it's the feedback and then what they do with it. So for every single common departmental assessment, pupils will receive some form of recorded feedback. That could be written, that could be oral, but recorded for pupils' use in the form of what went well and even better if statements. And then the pupil would be expected to follow up with the teacher to make those amendments and improvements over the course of the next few lessons to show that they've really mastered that material and they've learned from the process. Quite often, these common departmental assessments will be timed. They may be sat in a class setting. The teacher might give some advanced guidance of that, but that will be at the discretion of the individual department as to how they run. And each department will sketch out their assessments for the year. And in fact, parents, carers, and pupils can see those assessments on our curriculum maps, which we've published on our school website. So hopefully there won't be any surprises there. As I've already alluded to, some year groups have actually already sat an additional common departmental assessment this half term. And those are pupils in year 7, 10, 11, and 12. If they've not sat it already, they will be sitting it in the coming week. And the idea behind this additional early common departmental assessment, and we're calling it a health check so that we can differentiate between the two, is to try and capture some really early data for pupils at those transitional points in their curriculum. So those pupils will also go on to sit a full common departmental assessment next half term, but this is a smaller assessment to gauge how well they are doing in those very early weeks of the year, so that we can put correct intervention into place, so that we can kind of get a sense of how well they're progressing within their option subjects, if it's GCSE or A-level, and so we can provide the best tailored advice possible at a very early stage in their educational journey, so no surprises hit us later on along that track. So we are going to be reporting home all of these common departmental assessments this year, and that is what will feature in the termly report or the additional health check report that parents, carers, and pupils in those year groups, 7, 10, 11, and 12, will be receiving just after we get back from the half term. However, we are also going to be providing parents, carers, and pupils with another grade, and that is the progress descriptor, which I will turn to shortly. So this is how the common departmental assessment grades are awarded. We don't have a star A, B, C, D, E, U. We don't have 9 to 1 because we wanted to create a framework that was common across all year groups and that would make sense and would be mutually intelligible. Now, what this doesn't mean is that pupils in exam years won't be given an indication of how well they're progressing against public examination rubrics. We would expect teachers to also provide that information. So, for example, in history, we would be providing pupils with the common departmental assessment grade and feedback, but we might also tell them what mark they've got out of 10 in a Part C style assessment of the GCSE paper. So they will be given that exam-specific feedback as well to best prepare them for those public examinations that they will be sitting. And effectively, these are our grades. So we are using grades in the form of descriptions of grades. So exceptional, excellent, good, satisfactory, inconsistent, inadequate. So these are the CDA grades that will be awarded. And you can see with each one, there is an explanation and an action. Because it's really important that we do something with this data and pupils do something with this data and that they follow up. And I want to be absolutely clear here. We are not labeling the student. We are labeling the piece of work. So if we describe in our CDA something as satisfactory, we are not saying that that pupil is satisfactory. We're saying that that piece of work that they've happened to complete is satisfactory, or that piece of work that they've happened to complete at that point is inadequate. That does not mean that the pupil is inadequate. And indeed, lots of intervention will follow if pupils find themselves in those lower grade mark boundaries. And we know that over the course of their progress at Forest, it isn't linear. There will be moments where they kind of move up and down this spectrum. And that's very normal. That's all part of the learning process. I would really want to de-emphasize these grades and instead emphasize the feedback and what pupils do with that feedback as the key to successful learning at Forest. That is really important for me to emphasize. So just to give a very quick breakdown of these grades. So exceptional is our highest grade, and that's only awarded very rarely for really exceptional work. And that will show originality of thought, independence, mastery, and flair. And we do have, frankly, lots of pupils who do achieve exceptional grades and exceptional pieces of work, and they are invited to go and meet the warden, and they discuss that specific piece of work with him. It's a really high status thing, and we're really proud of our pupils that have achieved exceptional in assessments over the course of the last year or so since we've introduced it. Excellent is the next highest grade, and this is work well above the expected level. It may be displaying aspects of mastery of the curriculum. So excellent is a really high grade and something to be extremely proud of. Good is good. It's work at a good level. It's probably above the expected level. It's good. Understanding is secure, and it shows some elements of mastery. Satisfactory is satisfactory work. It's work at the expected level. Understanding is secure. Now, we know that pupils at Forest aim for higher than satisfactory, and that's great. And that's reflected very much in our outcome data. The average grade that a pupil achieved at GCSE this year was a grade 9, for example. So we know that they want to be above satisfactory, and we want to help them to get above satisfactory. So you'll notice that the action correlated to satisfactory suggests that although this is a good grade or a fine grade, helpful discussions and heightened opportunity for feedback between the teacher and the pupil should be forthcoming at that stage. And the teacher should be providing some prompts to help them progress to those higher levels. Work that's then more a cause for concern will fall into the inconsistent and inadequate categories. And this is work below the expected level of a pupil at Forest, or it might be work that demonstrates serious or persistent errors, or a task not completed to the adequate standard. So that's how our grade boundaries work and our rubric works as part of the common departmental assessments. But in addition to those common departmental assessments, we're also going to be issuing progress descriptors to our pupils. And the very big difference between these two things is that the progress descriptor is an holistic measure of pupil progress, rather than just a measure of their performance in one examination, test, or assessment. So when we provide our termly report, parents will receive both of these measures, a common departmental assessment grade and a progress descriptor. And there are 5 progress descriptors, and again, we're using the language of progress in learning: mastery, secure, emergent, surface, and concerning. And this judgment is informed by pretty much all of the data that teachers have access to. How well pupils are doing in their homework, how well they're engaging in lessons, how well they're collaborating with their peers, how well they're progressing through smaller, lower stakes assessments like vocabulary tests in NFL. So this is the data that is informing this judgment, but this judgment is a much broader and more holistic judgment. So I would really urge parents and carers to look at both of these grades and not worry if there is a bit of a difference between them, because a pupil may, for example, have performed relatively poorly in a specific assessment, but they may be progressing just fine in a subject. It might be that the most recent examination that they've sat in geography is based on a very particular skill, but actually they've developed lots of skills along the way in geography, and therefore they might be at the mastery or secure banding. So don't worry if you see a slight differential between these two grades. That can be normal in some circumstances. But of course, if you ever need any support with interpreting these grades, please do reach out to the teacher's tutor in the first instance. But I would also say that the pupils themselves should be really conversant with these grades, and they should know exactly why and where they are in their learning. That's a core part of the education that we offer at Forest, that pupil self-reflection. So I would suggest that both of these grades should better contextualize how well a pupil is doing, and you will be receiving reports, like I say, with this information on it at the end of the Michaelmas term and at the end of the Lent term. So what I've done is I've broken down these progress descriptors, and I'm not going to go through them at length here because I've provided a guide to assessment and reporting, as I've said, that was sent out at the beginning of the year, which breaks down this rubric. And hopefully you'll be able to see that when you receive your report. And we'll make sure that a copy of that guide accompanies every single report that is sent out, so it's really easy for you to access. But to cut a long story short, again, mastery is our highest, and it goes all the way down, as I've said, to concerning. So a pupil at the mastery level is a pupil who has shown that they are consistently attaining and progressing at the very highest levels. They might demonstrate full marks in topic tests or close to full marks. Their quizzes that they're engaging with on a almost lesson by lesson basis are of a really high standard. Their assessed work is very strong. Their homework is very strong. They're demonstrating a mastery of the curriculum. They both have mastered the skills, but also the knowledge required within that subject. We would expect pupils at the mastery level to go on to excel in public examinations and to achieve the very highest grades. So that's what that means in context. But you'll note, once again, there are next steps afforded to each of these characteristics. And one thing that we're really keen to stress, that even if a pupil is at the mastery level, their educational journey has not finished. There is much more they can do, much more for them to be stretched and challenged with through the super curricula, for example, to really enrich their learning to the highest possible level. And if I just pick another example of a progress descriptor to unpack and explain, if I go for the emergent, which is kind of the middle banding. So a pupil described as emergent for their progress would be a pupil who is attaining at generally sound levels, but clearly there's room for improvement. This should be prioritized. Most of their assessed work will fall into the good or maybe inconsistent banding, or maybe satisfactory. Emergent learners most often display learning at emergent or surface levels. So perhaps they don't have a deep understanding of the subject or the skills. Perhaps their knowledge isn't quite transferable yet. They might understand one topic, but they might not understand how it connects to the next topic. They may not be meeting most of the learning intentions in the curriculum, but they may well be meeting some of them. And what we would suggest is that pupils at that emergent level might go on to achieve grades which are indicative of perhaps a kind of passing grade or just above at GCSE, which would be that grade 4, grade 5, which is the C grade / low B grade in the old currency of GCSEs. Or indeed, it might be that they're on that kind of peripheral C grade level at A level. So it's certainly not room for panic, but it's certainly an area where we would want pupils to think about how they can improve if they're at that emergent level. And of course, the associated action would be intervention on behalf of the teacher to ensure that they do improve and that they do put steps into place to make progress. The next component of the reports, and this is a feature of the full report rather than the termly report, is the Forest Learner Rating. So in addition to the common departmental assessments and progress grades, we're also going to be providing pupils once per year with a rating of how well they're meeting the characteristics of a forest learner. And we really believe that if pupils embody these characteristics, they will go on to become excellent lifelong learners, not just successful in school, but successful in what it takes to be a great learner all the way through their lives. And we have broken down the forest learner to effectively 5 different strands: responsibility, direction, strategies, deadlines, and engagement. And all pupils at Forest will know what these strands are and what they entail. And effectively, to break that down, when we talk about responsibility, we're thinking about pupils who take responsibility for their learning. They take the responsibility for the learning of others. They maybe approach the teacher if they are stuck or if they have areas that they think they need to develop in. They won't be afraid to have those conversations. They will be self-reflective. A pupil that showcases excellent levels of direction is a pupil that really knows what it is that they need to do to improve. So they know how to go from, say, a B grade in a subject at A level to an A grade at that subject at A level. So they understand the direction of travel of their progress. And then strategies are what they need to do to unlock that progress. And we teach explicitly, as part of our personal development curriculum, but also within our subjects, the learning strategies that we know work, the learning strategies that are evidence-based. So things like dual coding, things like retrieval practice, things like interleaving and spaced repetition. And I've provided parents and carers with a glossary in the guide to assessment and reporting of all of these learning strategies that we explicitly teach pupils, so that you may be better informed in using that language too at home. But effectively, these are the things that we know work. And we want pupils to be using these strategies at home to, in essence, become their own teacher. And we know that that would be the making of an excellent forest learner. So effectively, what we provide is a rating of how well they are progressing towards these characteristics and standards. And that rating is expressed using stars. And it's a 4-star scale. The more stars, the better, just like the Michelin guide or just like film reviews. So for example, if a pupil has 2 stars for responsibility, that's 2 out of 4. There's clearly areas for development there. And we hope this gives parents, carers, but also pupils a really granular sense of how well they're progressing in those characteristics that for some may take 5 to 7 years, if not longer, to develop, to become really excellent lifelong learners. And we hope that encourages a really holistic conversation about how they are progressing. And I have broken down what each of those star ratings mean, and that again can be found in the guide to assessment and reporting for parents. So what does 3 stars mean in strategies? What does 1 star mean in engagement? Now, for some of those, it's going to be really self-explanatory. So if a pupil has 1 star for engagement, they're clearly not thoroughly engaged in the subject. It might be that they're distracted. It might mean that they're not demonstrating the highest levels of work ethic that they can, or they may be showing aspects of complacency towards their work. Likewise, the student with 4 stars is a pupil with a really admirable work ethic. They've got a clear approach to the subject that's grounded in curiosity, openness to learning, inquisitiveness, questions, all of that stuff. The same is true of deadlines. I think that will be fairly self-explanatory. A low star rating means they're not making those deadlines. They're regularly asking for extensions, or they're not handing in homework on time, or they're not meeting coursework or NEA deadlines. Now, it's hopefully rare that this will be the first you hear of that. Hopefully that will have been picked up along the way through our kind of sanction system, but also through the tutor system and the teachers and the tutors speaking regularly about those missing deadlines. Responsibility, direction, and strategies may be a little bit more complex to unpack. And that's why I think providing you with the rubric is hopefully helpful there, so you understand what the different stars mean. And of course, pupils will be trained in this rubric all the way across their 7 years at Forest. So they should be really conversant in what these things mean. The other component of reports is pupil academic monitoring, and we're really excited about this component of reporting. We think it's a really excellent development of our reporting system, and it's a development that was particularly noted by ISI in their most recent visit as something which exemplifies really good reporting and progress. So in effect, what we are asking pupils to do is to feed back on their reports, to show that they've digested them, to show that they've reflected on their progress, and to show that they know what they are doing next. Rather than the report being a printed document that then gets filed, we want it to be a lived document that is really informing pupils' next steps. So in essence, the pupil academic monitoring process is a way of them self-reflecting on their learning. And we wanted to raise the stakes a little bit by printing that on the report. So you as parents and carers can actually see what pupils are saying about their learning and what it is that they think they need to do next. And we provide them with lots of time when those reports are issued to read those reports, to reflect on them, and then to write their targets and respond to those questions with their tutor. And it is then discussed with their tutor in a one-to-one, so that by the time it's published on the report, it represents a real kind of thorough and robust process of reflection. I would say that pupils at Forest are really accustomed to receiving feedback from their teachers via grades and assessments of their work. And this type of feedback, though very helpful, does not always provide the incentive for changing study habits and behaviours. Pupils may know that they need to make changes after a less than ideal grade, but the score might not highlight the specific problems that need to be addressed. This is where this element of self-reflection comes really to its own and really handy, because it will get them to think about that really specifically. I think, and it's well proven, that academic monitoring and reflections helps pupils to develop their skills and review their effectiveness rather than carrying on doing things the same way that they've always done them. It's about questioning in a positive way what they do and why they do it, and then deciding whether there's a better or more efficient way of doing it in the future. So we actually hope that the process of academic monitoring also helps to build their skills of self-reflexivity, their skills of self-evaluation, which of course will be so vital to them in the future too. So we think it has a dual purpose there, really. Here's a little example. So this is from a year 10 pupil a few years ago. And this is the level of detail in which they were going into when they were reflecting. And I've just provided a sample of some of their answers here. For most pupils, we give them 5 or 6 prompt questions. There are just 3 here. And if I could just pick a few examples. So we asked this pupil, what is the proudest achievement that they made this term? And they said their proudest academic achievement was being able to attain, in their words, superbly high scores, which of course they were, in several Latin vocab tests. They've then gone into granular detail about how well they've performed in their Gothic writing component in English language. So I think that was lovely, and it really shows their understanding of where they are, the direction of travel, but where they currently are too. We want students to be frank and open as well. So we ask them, what have you found most challenging? And explain why you feel this way. And this pupil clearly felt that their physics was an area that they wanted to develop. But what I thought was absolutely brilliant about this, and no doubt prompted by those wonderful one-to-one conversations they have with their tutor, is they also suggested how they might get better. So this particular pupil wrote about using Physics and Maths Tutor, which is an online resource that we signpost, to continue doing constant practice papers and gather feedback from their teacher. So they are expressing precisely the kinds of strategies and interventions that we would want a pupil to consider to make that next step. So we hope that pupil academic monitoring plays a really important role in the assessment and reporting process. Going back to my earlier point when I introduced the academic leadership team, it is really important for us to remember that it takes a village when it comes to all aspects of education, but certainly academic development and progress. And I just wanted to map out all of the various stakeholders involved and really kind of how they intertwine in that journey around the pupil and their progress. So I'm not going to kind of go through all of this, but just to be clear, the tutors and head of house have a really important role to facilitate academic monitoring, to speak to the pupils every single day, to receive one-to-one style coaching and real kind of diagnostic opportunities to reflect on their feedback. The subject teachers clearly have a huge role here in putting together their reports, but also the day in, day out testing and teaching and assessment of pupils and their feedback to the pupils in that formative sense as well. And then the academic leadership team is looking for those macro trends and patterns and working individually with pupils. So you might know, for example, that Dr. Peters, Miss Mackey, Mr. Sage meet with pupils one-to-one who they have seen as a result of their analysis of their data at a more macro level, that those are the pupils that may need that little bit of support. They might need some better organization. They may need some time to reflect on their study skills. So that level of intervention is also happening through the academic leadership team, as well as the subject-specific intervention that is happening through classroom teaching, but also through clinics, lunchtime revision classes, etc., etc. And then the final part of this process, which is absolutely pivotal to unlocking a pupil's potential, is the work of you, the parents and carers involved in this process. We really want you to engage your child in discussing their report rather than just filing it away. We really want you to use all of this data that hopefully you're going to find useful to kind of unpack and unlock and ask the people, ask your son and daughter to really spend time really unlocking that and really thinking about it with you. And of course, please do feel free to contact the tutor, the head of house, who will be able to liaise with the subject teacher if you do have specific queries or concerns that aren't addressed as a result of this data. So just a few frequently asked questions to try and preempt maybe some questions that might be coming out. So how often will we receive grades and reports? All pupils will receive a termly report, which will include their common departmental assessment grades and their progress descriptors. So you will get that once per term. You will, instead of receiving the termly report in the Trinity term, though, receive the end of year exam report, because instead of a CDA right at the end, they all sit an end of year exam. So it's very similar, but it's a more developed assessment. This will be published in the first week of Lent 1 for the Michaelmas term and the first week of Trinity 1 for the Lent term. Parents and carers of pupils at transitional points, as I've already said, will receive an additional report, and that will be issued at the start of next half term, reflecting back on this half term and their very early progress at that transitional point within those subjects. Pupils, as I've already said, will receive, and parents and carers, of course, will receive a full report each year in addition to these termly reports. And as I've already explained, this will include lots of information as well as the common departmental assessment grades and the progress descriptor. You'll also receive that written commentary from the teacher. You'll get the sanction and reward data, the attendance data, and the pupil academic monitoring data, as well as the tutor report, which is very much about their personal development and progress through those strands of their education at Forest. Okay. How will we find out if our child is struggling in between reports and parents' evenings? So to be really clear, of course, you'll also be receiving those termly reports, which should hopefully close that gap a little bit. But you will also be contacted if we feel that your child is regressing or struggling in a subject. Our academic leadership team, our heads of department, our heads of house, our tutors and teachers are constantly in dialogue. We're constantly liaising. And we as an academic leadership team are always looking at that data and meeting regularly, if not weekly sometimes, with heads of department to overview how their subjects are looking and how pupils within their subjects are progressing. So if we do feel that your child is regressing or struggling, obviously we will get in contact as soon as possible. We will arrange intervention, we'll speak to you on the phone, and we'll issue support and what we are doing at Forest to support. We don't just look at high-level regression either. So we don't just look at concerning grades. We also monitor deviation against baseline performance and pupil voice. So that means that even small fluctuations and slips are noted and that we do intervene early. We also do the other thing as well. So what sometimes is kind of levied as a critique of schools is those pupils who are perhaps sailing along and doing well, but perhaps aren't reaching their full potential, aren't picked up on. We are aware of that. We look at their baseline data, which we assess at the beginning of year 7 and in year 12, to see how well they are actually progressing against their expected trajectory. And we're therefore able to see, for those pupils in the middle, whether actually they need further intervention and support, whether they are actually reaching their potential. And likewise, pupils at the very top, we put in stretch and challenge and other intervention mechanisms there to make sure they are hitting the very highest levels possible. Parents' evenings and reports have been really logically spaced throughout the year, and that's something that my team works really hard every year to ensure. So there shouldn't be a term, or really even a half term, frankly, that goes by without some information, either through report, a parents' evening, a termly report, an end of year exam report, etc., etc. So there is a lot of information that we hopefully are sending home to you, and hopefully you see that as a really positive thing. So in terms of how many reports you will receive per year, most year groups will effectively receive 4 reports, 2 times termly reports in Lent and Trinity, an end of year exam report and a full report. Year 12 are a slight exception to that. Their full report and their end of year exam report are merged together. And we feel that that's a really logical time to do the full report, because obviously they've sat an A-level style assessment at that point, so we can give really robust feedback there. Year 11 and 13 are also an exception because they're not with us for the entirety of the academic year. And of course, rightly, they're focused on their public examinations after the Easter holiday. So they receive 2 times termly reports, a mock exam report and a full report. They won't receive an end of year exam report because of course they're sitting public examinations rather than end of year exams internally at Forest. And then in terms of parents' evenings and carers, parent and carers evenings, most year groups will have 1 parent-carer evening and 1 parent engagement event, which have pretty much all occurred now. Those parent engagement events are obviously an opportunity to meet the tutor, to hear headline information about the kind of development plans and the curriculum for personal development over the course of the academic year for the relevant year group. Whereas the parent-carer event is much more a kind of parent-teacher consultation where you can speak specifically about progress within the subject. Pupils in year 12 are an exception to this. We're hosting 2 parent-carer evenings in year 12. We're hosting an early evening to discuss transition to the 6th form. And then later in the academic year, we're going to be hosting an invite-only event for those pupils that we think require further intervention as they transition to year 13. Some parent and carers evenings are online whilst others are in person, and hopefully you've already seen that in my communication at the beginning of the academic year. But just to be clear, this is the map of our parent carer evenings across the academic year. And again, I'm not going to sit and read all of these out, but you have that information hopefully easily accessible. And if you do have any queries about those dates, please do let us know, do write into the tutor, who will be happy to clarify. But we will, of course, also be reminding parents and carers of these upcoming events in due course, and obviously well in advance of the events themselves, so you know exactly what's happening and when that is appropriate to your specific child's year group. And what I also thought I would provide is a bit of a map of the reports, when they're issued, and what's included in them. So I've shaded here for each year group and for each report what it is that is being sent home. And hopefully what this gives you is a sense that there is a really comprehensive oversight of reporting and progress and assessment across the academic year, and that there shouldn't really be much more than really, I think, 6-7 weeks that go by without something formally being sent home in some form. And that's it from me, really, for assessment and reporting at Forest. I think we do have one question in the comments section, and this was in regards to an email of the 21st of February. A full curriculum map was included for year 9. There were links to year 7 and 11, 12 to 13, which didn't work. Can you issue year 10 curriculum maps? So I can answer that question really, really easily and clearly. If you go onto our website and if you navigate to 11 to 18, our senior school, and then in the departments, you will find all of the curriculum maps. They are all published and they all work. So please do feel free to navigate to our school website. They are all on there under the departmental section. Thank you all so much for your engagement this evening. There will obviously be a recording of this, which will go live onto YouTube after the event. So if ever you need to revisit or you want to come back to this information, then it should be there for you. And in addition to that, the guide to assessment and reporting should hopefully provide more clarification as well. Finally, there is a QR code here to scan if you want to provide further feedback on this session and its efficacy, but also if you want to ask additional questions, I can collate all of that information and then feedback. But I do urge you also to get in touch with tutors who will be really happy to answer any questions that you might have. Thank you all for your time this evening.